He is known by ISIS as the German, Abu Talha al-Almani, a notorious ISIS fighter and recruiter, a former German rapper who in intense and disturbing videos called for violent jihad and proudly held the severed head of an ISIS victim. Dennis Cuspert is his real name, a German national targeted by the United States as a specially designated global terrorist who survived a U.S. missile strike in 2015 and is believed to be still alive somewhere in ISIS-controlled Syria. What has not been disclosed until now is that an FBI employee with top secret clearance lied to her bosses, secretly traveled to Syria, and married Cuspert for a short time, becoming the ISIS bride of the very terrorist she was assigned to investigate. That now former employee is Daniela Green, her face obscure due to concerns for her safety. Having violated the public trust and endangered our nation's security, according to federal prosecutors, Green served just 2 years in prison and is now free. She wouldn't answer CNN's questions, saying, "If I talk to you, my family will be in danger." The information about her case comes from previously sealed court documents. The records unsealed only after Green finished cooperating with authorities and after prosecutors asked the judge to make them public. Unsealing these documents, they write, will allow appropriate public access to this case. Green, who was already married, traveled to Syria in the summer of 2014 and not only spent time in the company of members of ISIS, but ended up marrying an infamous ISIS terrorist.
He is calling upon his followers to commit attacks inside Europe. He says, I quote, "Europe is a new battleground." He says, go and slaughter them, ambush them, shed their blood, take hostages, kill them.
Portions of an exclusive report from CNN on the conduct of one Daniela Green, an FBI employee who lied to our nation, in essence, to marry a terrorist from ISIS. What on earth would possess anybody, but especially someone working for the Federal Bureau of Investigation, to go rogue and get involved romantically with a terrorist? Obviously, there's something going on upstairs that we need some insights concerning, and that is why we are pleased to be joined now by psychotherapist at the Renew Center of Florida, Dr. Lisa Palmer. Dr. Lisa, thanks for your time.
It's great to be here, JD.
Is there a medical, or it's so good to have you, and this case is so compelling, so unthinkable. Is there a mental condition? Does this have a name?
Well, it could have a couple of names, but how bizarre is this? We have an ISIS recruiter who literally recruits an FBI agent who's doing investigations on him. Couldn't be more bizarre, right? There's so many possibilities for this. What we do know is that he obviously accessed her weaknesses. He got right into her psychology to figure out how she works psychologically, to actually get her to abandon her mission, abandon her family here in the United States, abandon the FBI, and actually fly to Syria to marry this guy. So there's a couple of possibilities psychologically as far as what was going on here. Hybristophilia is a word, kind of a tongue twister, but a word that comes up for me, JD. This is when somebody is attracted to a criminal, a bad boy, someone who engages in immoral behavior. And there's so many reasons for that, but oftentimes these women are attracted to these guys because they sympathize with them, they empathize, they want to rescue them, so many different reasons. The other possibility is that she suffered from a version of Stockholm syndrome, which is very common amongst people who have some type of PTSD. Now, what happens with this is that the hostage basically falls in love with their captor as a mode of survival. And so there's a possibility there that she had either or of these symptoms, and it would be very interesting to do some further investigation as to how the ISIS recruiter actually recruited her.
Just a couple of observations, but practically to the point. I understand that the FBI does fairly extensive background investigations of its employees before they're put into sensitive situations. Is there a discipline of psychological questioning that would reveal a tendency toward hybristophilia, the fact that you want to commit treason, in essence, aid and abet the enemy as a, quote, act of love?
You know, JD, when people are under certain circumstances, they have these emotional reactive responses, and they're so bizarre. Oftentimes, like I was talking about, a Stockholm syndrome, this is something that we saw in Patty Hearst in 1974. It's something that we also saw in Elizabeth Smart in 2002. That wasn't something that they could predict. It's something that just happened out of circumstance. Of course, the FBI has to do their investigations, and they have to become well aware of who this person really is and what their belief systems are that are driving their behavior. But when someone's in a situation when they're being manipulated by a charmer, you never know what's going to come up unless it's been a part of their history in the past. Then we can know for sure.
Now, forgive me, this may be my chauvinism coming through, or just my layperson status. As a layman, when I hear this, when I hear about the first condition, hybristophilia, it seems, now you can correct me, maybe men are, but there are so many women. For example, there's like a subset industry of prison pen pals in the United States, not based on true prison reform, but based on what appears to be romantic interest. Then the Stockholm syndrome, if I'm not mistaken, the name comes from a hostage situation that occurred in Stockholm, Sweden. To me, as a layman, my reaction is the Stockholm syndrome is kind of a mode of survival, and it's equal opportunity for men and women, but hybristophilia is more common in, or women are more susceptible to that psychological condition. Am I misunderstanding it, or is there that type of differentiation?
You're not misunderstanding it. And actually, any gender is susceptible to any of these conditions, but we tend to see with hybristophilia more females being prone to this. It is, like I said before, a sexual paraphilia, but what we're seeing with both of these conditions, both Stockholm and hybristophilia, is a common thread of the woman sympathizing with the abuser, and that is a common thread amongst both of these conditions. And also for the Stockholm, like I said, they're doing it for their survival, whereas the hybristophilia is more of a sexual paraphilia, and where they feel that they can actually rescue the perpetrator.
Well, let's turn from these curious psychological conditions to one that is more common, and that is political office and making policy. We just had the Obamacare repeal and replacement bill pass the House of Representatives yesterday, and I can remember during my days on the Hill when we would deal with questions of insurance, there were real concerns about provisions for mental health. Are there still concerns now in this ongoing debate about mental health coverage and how we deal with insurance and care for those who are dealing with mental illness?
Well, I hear a lot of the concerns in social media now and all around about what this new bill could mean for people with pre-existing conditions, and that includes mental health. I also know that a lot of women are very much concerned, as well as people who may not be in a very good financial place as to how they might afford higher premiums if that's what comes to pass. So there definitely is a lot of concerns, and I know that as far as mental health coverage, that's something that is a concern for a lot of people, whether or not their premiums will be high or if they'll even be covered by this new bill.
Well, I can tell you back during my days, Republican Senator Pete Domenici of New Mexico was an absolute champion calling for inclusion of provisions in terms of mental health as we were dealing with these insurance questions then. Just based on my past experience, I can tell you that a lot of what's happening now is hyperbole designed to let me put it diplomatically, cast doubt on this replacement plan because there's a midterm election in about 18 months. But let me get away from politics to talk more about, since May is Mental Health Month, I'm interested in the public perspective now on mental health and mental illness. We have, in terms of political correctness, we have tried to use terminology that at times treads lightly upon a condition or tries to explain it away. I still believe the word mental illness are conjoined in our vocabulary. What is the popular assessment? By that I mean the recognition of mental health as being important to the overall health of Americans now in this second decade of the 21st century.
Well, there's about 44 million Americans in this country that suffer from mental health conditions, and what we have to understand, JD, is that the mind and the body are absolutely connected, and when we experience something emotionally, our body responds physically, and it does affect us health-wise, and the body also affects the mind. That's why when I practice psychotherapy, I'm not just looking at the mind, but I'm looking at functional medicine and how we can actually bridge conjoin the body and the mind so that we can be more healthy. So it is something that you really can't separate the two, and it would be a disadvantage for people to think that we can have health insurance just covering conditions of the body without actually looking at the mind, because the two are very much connected.
And as we take a look at different conditions, and again, to my way of thinking as a layman, you can argue that medicine, regardless of the realm or the specialty, is both a science and an art. But it seems, especially when we're dealing with the chemistry of the brain and mental illness and pharmacology, that there's still a lot of trial and error. And yet now I understand that that there is a new drug on the market that perhaps is being used to prevent depression. Is it accurate to call it a new kind of super antidepressant, or what is on the cutting edge of research as we try to deal with depression and utilize pharmaceuticals in that regard, Doctor?
Well, it's very interesting. It's being touted as a resilience drug, and by definition, resilience is really the ability to overcome your obstacles and defeat stress. So if you don't experience stress, how are you supposed to defeat it? And I like to say, fall 5 times and stand up 6. It's a very popular phrase. And the victory is really in the standing up, but you can only stand up as if you fall down, right? So you have to have those defeats sometimes in order to build resistance. Now, if you have a medication that's preventing you from experiencing stress, it's preventing you from feeling. This is something that is actually a problem in our culture right now, where we have a lot of people who lack empathy, who there's a lack of humanity, there's a lack of compassion, not only for other people, but for themselves. And part of the healing process is really getting in touch with that humanity and that experience of being a human being and not a narcissist, not somebody who lacks empathy, not a hollowed out person. And unfortunately, sometimes we do have to experience those obstacles in life so that we can overcome them and we can transform them into opportunities for ourselves that can not only make a difference for ourselves in our own life, but also for other people.
Doctor, as you talk about stress, I'm reminded of the observations, I believe it was Dr. Wayne Dyer, who actually wrote a book entitled The Joy of Stress, and he said certain requirements of society in terms of holding a job and getting to work on time and having certain responsibilities, they might be stressful, but the counteraction, the quote bad stress, he characterized as distress. Do you buy into Dr. Dyer's dichotomy? There's about a minute left, Doc.
Well, I love Dr. Wayne Dyer, and I I love a lot of his philosophies about balance in life, and he really had so much wisdom that I think we can all very much learn from, and it is really his legacy. And I think that what I want to leave people with is the idea that strengths are really found inside of ourselves. We live in a society where we believe that the strengths are coming from outside of ourselves, that they're coming from a medication or some type of miracle pill. What we really need to do is to tap into the strengths and resources within us that can help us to overcome obstacles. And sometimes obstacles are repeating themselves until we gain the wisdom to be able to overcome them and do the right thing. So that's my
Well,
belief on
Dr.
that.
Lisa Palmer, we want to repeat having you back again and again. Thank you for your insights. When we come back, a curious story you'll want to hear about.